Before I say anything of any kind of importance, I just want to point out that whenever I wear my hair like this, like part of the middle with like volume here, I always feel like I'm channeling Gary Oldman in Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is truly a fashion icon. So hey guys, so it is still OCD Awareness Week, and I wanted to make another video, which I know is crazy considering this is going to be the third one in a row about OCD, but I just wanted to kind of take advantage of this week that we get to bring awareness to OCD, to kind of put some more information out there. So I've mentioned in a few different videos my process of kind of getting better, but I haven't really gone into any kind of detail about it. And when I mean like get better, I'll say this a million times, like this will have to go on my gravestone or something because it's like all I've ever said, is that it's not about a cure, it's about maintenance. So we'll get into that in a second. So a lot of people on different platforms will message me or whatever, which before I've said this, but before I get into anything, once again, if you want to reach out to me, the best way is just through a YouTube comment, okay? If you send me messages on Instagram, if we're not following each other or if I'm not following you, I don't know how that works. Your message just goes into my DMs and then like it just disappears. Like I might be able to read it and then I go to like answer it and it's gone. I don't know if that's a glitch in my like app or something, but a lot of times I'll open a message, I'll close it and I'll go do something else. I'll come back and it's gone. So don't do that. Also, I won't accept any friend requests from people that I don't know on Facebook. And if you send me a message on there and we're not friends, it just goes into that other inbox and I never see it. So the best way really to get in touch with me is just through YouTube comments. Anyway, like I was saying, a lot of people message me about, what I've done to quote, get better and like the process that I've gone through, asking me like if and what kinds of medications I'm on, what therapy I've done, like tips and tricks and all that stuff. To answer that first question about medication, no, I am not on any kind of medication. If you've watched any of my old OCD videos, or really the first video I ever made about OCD, I kind of go into detail about how it was really a bad reaction to a medication that kind of like kickstarted my OCD. And I found out very quickly through trying to remedy that with other medications. My doctor and I realized, you know what, maybe this isn't the right route for me because I don't seem to, like my body chemistry does not seem to tolerate those types of medications. So rather than try it a million times and go through all this like really awful sets of side effects, we were just like, you know what, let's not do this. So we didn't and took that off the table for me, which honestly is fine because I, would rather not be medicated for something that I don't absolutely have to. Which is like kind of, I know, a touchy thing for a lot of people. A lot of people feel like they really need medication to get through OCD. And trust me, as someone with mental illness, I'm all for medication if it's going to help you, but I don't think you should be medicated for things that you don't need to be. And I'll kind of expand on that a little bit, I guess. But I do want to say that you should not really be asking for any kind of medication advice from anyone that's not your personal doctor. Like, even a doctor that's not your doctor can't really give you that kind of, like if you ask a doctor in a group chat or something online for OCD, why are you bringing me garbage? I don't want this. I don't. And why do you have it? No, you can't chew this here. I'm really sorry. You can't chew the crinkly paper while I'm filming. But yeah, you can't even like really get advice from a doctor that's not your doctor, even if it's in like an OCD chat or something like that. It just doesn't, you can't do that because they don't know you personally. They don't know your body chemistry. They don't know your history. They don't know anything like that. And something that works for me or works for whoever doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. For, a lot of people, the medication that did awful things to me is really what helped them. So it's not really something that someone can give you advice on. Someone can maybe share their experience about a medication, but I see a lot of people posting like, oh, what's the best medication for OCD? There is no best medication for OCD or anything. You have to find what's gonna work for you. And that said, like, I'm not a doctor, so maybe I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's just common sense telling me that's how it is. Really, the main thing that's kind of like a proven way to combat OCD and really kind of get to a place that you can handle it is through exposure response prevention therapy, or ERP. And some people, you know, when they're really feeling bad, they feel like they want medication to kind of kickstart that process, because I'll go into it, but ERP is really scary. I'll be very honest with you, it's scary, and I'll tell you what I had to do and all that stuff. A lot of people need something that's going to take that edge off. If you're taking medication, obviously if it's working for you, it's going to make you feel better. And a lot of people fall into this trap where they're like, well, I'm better, I don't really have to be on medication anymore. You feel better because you're medicated. So when you come off that medication, you're like, wow, I'm back to square one, if not worse off than when I started. And now I don't have any of the coping skills that I need because I thought I was fine. I didn't do my therapy. I, you know, just figured everything was okay, and now I can't handle it. If you're using medication in conjunction with therapy, that's fine. I would just never, honestly, from my personal opinion, once again, not a doctor, I would never rely on medication alone for OCD. So as far as ERP goes, my experience with it was I was part of kind of like a group study. The thing is, I was emailing people and I was like, listen, I'm interested in doing this therapy, but I live in China. I'm a US citizen, so blah, blah, blah. That's where all my stuff is. And, you know, can you do it remotely? Can you do it through Skype? All this stuff. I must have sent out like 20 messages to different doctors and different, you know, whatever. All but this one were like, no, we can't do that. We're not going to do it remotely. Or it's going to be a problem with our insurance, or literally some of them told me it was too much work to go through insurance. And I was like, well, thanks for having my best interests at heart. But yeah, so this one therapist or group or whatever it was that I messaged got back to me. They're like, actually, we're looking for participants in a study. And it just kind of fit me super well. It was for people who were, you know, in school and wanted to, either their OCD was so bad that they couldn't leave to go to therapy, or it was just like they were far away from any available therapists or anything like that, and they wanted to do it remotely. So it was basically a test to see how well this therapy could be administered remotely. So we met on Skype. It wasn't technically Skype, it was some kind of like special doctor portal thing that they had. But we met twice a week. It was for a couple months. And ultimately, I did what everyone is really afraid to do when they start doing this therapy. So if you know anything about ERP, it's just that it's pretty much exposing you to all of the things that you're afraid of, and then controlling how you respond to those thoughts and that fear. Through doing this over time, you kind of acclimate yourself, which is really the goal. You can administer this kind of therapy by yourself. Granted, it is a little bit harder to stick to because you don't have someone kind of guiding you. For me personally, I'm the kind of person in like all walks of life that if I'm not like going to a class, or I'm not like having to be somewhere at a certain time and being held accountable by like a higher power, I won't do it. Like, I don't know why. I just like can't bring myself to do those kinds of things. So this was like a perfect thing for me. Granted, for me, I live in China, so it's a 12-hour time difference from New York. So it was like at weird times that I would have therapy and be like late at night, which really they don't recommend because it's not really good to do it right before you go to sleep. But it was like, well, we had to work with like what we had, so it was fine. There was a couple doctors involved, and we would do kind of like a checklist. So when I first started, they did almost like a survey to see where I stood with my OCD and if it was even OCD at all, which is like one of the basic fears of people with OCD, is that what if I don't have OCD? What if I'm just crazy? And it was like, as soon as we started talking and got through the survey, they were like, well, it seems like you have a pretty textbook case of OCD. And I was like, okay, cool. Then we went from there and I told them what my fears were. I had to make kind of like, maybe like a hierarchy, which I've heard other people had to do too. So you have to start with things that are not quite as scary, and then like it goes from not scary to the scariest things. You have to kind of work through it that way. The whole point of this therapy is to kind of put you in situations that make you very uncomfortable, and this does not sound like it's fun, and it's not. Like, it's not, the point of it is not to be fun. It's to kind of learn a lesson and to be able to control yourself. So for example, I remember I told my doctor that, let's say I was afraid of like stabbing somebody. I was afraid of stabbing my pets or something. So what I would have to do gradually, so he made me, I at my apartment at the time, I only had a knife that was like this big because I didn't want any big knives in the house, which is an avoidance compulsion. So, you know, I had to break that. He's like, no, you have to go buy a big knife. And I was like, okay, so I did. And it was really uncomfortable to have it, but whatever. I've since acclimated and bought more knives to suit my needs. And then over time, I'd have to handle the knife, you know, in front, like if we're on Skype looking at each other, I'd have to like show him that I was holding the knife, get used to holding it and like moving it around and not being so like conscious of the fact that I could suddenly reach out and stab my cat or something. And then I had to do things like I had to hold the knife in one hand and then maybe like pet my cat, or I had to do something like that. So it kind of gradually gets scarier and scarier. And then at some point I also had to sleep with the knife next to like on my nightstand. And then the last thing, I think I had to carry it around with me. So I had a knife that came with like a cover on it. Oh, hi. My cat is in my lap. Oh, I feel so blessed. Thank you. So I had a knife that had a cover on it, and I had to leave that in my purse. So like when I was on the bus or like when I was in a crowd of people, I knew that there was a sharp knife in my bag that I could reach into anytime and just like go on a rampage. Granted, I didn't. And then, like over time, it really became nothing. Like I forgot about the knife in my bag. So I had to do things like that. And then I had to eventually start writing scripts and stories, and I would narrate them as I was writing them. So I would write them with the doctor or the therapist watching, and we would talk it out, and I'd, you know, type it out. And why does my cat do this? Go. And I'm sorry, I'm against trigger warnings in videos about like OCD and stuff because it leads to avoidance. But I am just going to say trigger warning for like sexual assault. That's kind of like a different story. Being here in China and looking the way that I do, I look very different from a lot of people. I often will get assaulted on the bus, or, you know, when there's a crowd of people, men will like rub themselves against me or touch me. I have to control my reaction because one, I don't trust that anything will be done if I say anything about it. And then two, I also don't want to get deported or like kicked out. So I have to kind of just like handle it quietly and not make a big scene, which is so against every fiber of my being. But anyway, so I would have to write stories with my therapist about how when men would assault me, I would basically take the knife out of my bag and start stabbing them. So I'd have to go into like really fine details about where I was stabbing them, what it felt like, how I felt doing it, you know, what they look like, what their faces look like, what everyone else was doing. So it kind of really puts you in that mindset of like, oh my God, like it feels real. And the whole point, like I know it sounds really awful. It is. It sucks. But it helps because once you start kind of thinking about these things more and kind of going with everything more and letting yourself just think the thoughts that come rather than being like, no, I can't think that. I can't think that. We can't control what pops into our head. We can only control how we react to it. So once I, you know, would write out these stories and read them, I'd be crying, I'd be upset, I'd be anxious, I'd be, you know, whatever. Then it would like pass. And then I'd be like, oh, I'm alive. And look, I didn't go crazy. I didn't kill somebody. I didn't like do something totally disproportionate to what the situation was. It's not a fun situation, but it's really the only way. And I know that it seems really awful. And the thing is, like, so many people want just like a really quick fix. Like they're like, no, I just need it to be gone. I just need it to like go away. I need to feel like myself again. I'm really sorry to tell you, like, I'm really sorry to break this news to you. There is no overnight cure for, like, you can't just take an Aleve or an ibuprofen and be like, wow, I feel better. Like, it's not a headache, you know? It's a mental health disorder that you have to, you know, work towards controlling and feeling better. And as I talked about in my previous video, it's real easy to fall back into, you know, old compulsions when you have kind of like a relapse. And they happen. Like it can happen, you know, 20 years from now when I haven't thought about this for like that entire 20 years. Like it could just happen. And that's why I say it's not about a cure, it's about maintenance. Through doing this therapy and going through, you know, these experiences, I was then able to kind of get back to a normal life. So if I had a thought that I was in a crowd of people and that I was gonna like suddenly snap and like start stabbing people or something like that. I would just be like, yeah, that might happen, because that's what they teach you to do. Like, you just kind of got to be like, yeah, okay. You got to agree with the thought rather than being like, no, I would never do that. And I see a lot of people doing that in the comments too. They'll like tell me what they're going through. They're like, yeah, I've had thoughts like this, but I would never do that. Like, I'm such a good person. I believe you, but you shouldn't frame it that way, because it turns into this like denial type compulsion. You shouldn't do that. You should just be like, yeah, I have those thoughts too, period. And when you have a thought, like I could have a thought, I'll think of something right now. I could go up to the 11th floor and I could jump off this building right now. And like sometimes I would have a thought, I'm like, oh my God, I could just jump right off the roof. What's stopping me? And I used to be like, no, I can't do that. Oh my God, like, you know, lock the windows, lock the doors, don't let me out. And now I'm just like, yeah, well, I might. What of it? Like, so you just have to be like, yeah, that could happen. And then you just go about your day and you kind of just like acclimate to feeling the way that you do. And like I said, I was able to kind of get back to a normal life. Like when I was much younger, I like loved scary movies. I loved like gore. I loved all that stuff. And then once this happened to me, I like couldn't sit and watch like a scary show because I was like, oh my God, I think this is going to trigger me into, you know, becoming a murderer or something. So like I rewatched all of the seasons of American Horror Story up to when this happened to me. And then I was able to watch all the ones that I missed because I didn't think I could handle it. Which, by the way, are you guys watching Apocalypse? Oh my God. When this video comes out, I think the last episode will have been episode 5. I don't know, but I love it. It is so good. This is the best season in a long time. But yeah, so I would, you know, then I would do kind of my own exposures. I would find, you know, scary stories to read or like things that I otherwise would have avoided, and I just started reading them. And at one point my therapist had me go and look for scary news stories about like shooters or about, you know, things that I was afraid that I would do, like murdering people or, you know, whatever. And we would watch like news videos or like footage, or we would read articles, and we'd have to be like, I could do that. I might go and shoot somebody. And that was where we left it. That's just like how you have to like be okay with that uncertainty. And that's like the hardest thing for people with OCD, because everything's, what if I did this? What if I am this way? What if this happens? What if I do this thing and then this happens? There's no answer to these what ifs. Like, you can't go into the future and like look back and be like, wow, I never did any of those things that I was afraid of. Let me go back now and live my life, you know, comfortably, knowing that I will never do these things. Obviously, we can't do that. We just have to kind of learn to live with that uncertainty. That's my experience with medication, ERP, all that stuff. Have you guys tried ERP? I mean, I'd love to know your experiences. I know that for different types of OCD, obviously they do different things. Like if you're afraid of contamination, you have to touch certain things a certain way or whatever. That's just the first example that comes to mind. But I'd love to know what your experiences are. But yeah, I guess that's it for this video, and I will see you guys next time. Bye!